13 years ago, my daughter left my 3 grandchildren on my doorstep, saying she just needed a nap. She never came back. I raised them, fed them, and held them when she treated them like they were trash. But this morning, she didn't return with a thank you card or an apology. She returned with a SWAT team, a lawyer in a $3,000 suit, and the accusation that I had kidnapped her children. They thought they had me cornered. They thought I was some senile old man they could crush without effort, but they knew nothing about the mustard-colored envelope that had been hidden under a loose floorboard in my bedroom for years. When I slapped that yellowed paper down on the judge's bench, the look on her face wasn't anger, it was pure shock. She looked at me and whispered, almost voiceless, "Do the children know about this?" I held her gaze and replied, "Not yet, but they're about to. And before I tell you what was inside that envelope, please like and subscribe to the channel. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from. It helps this old man know his story is being heard." It was 6 a.m. on a Sunday, and the only thing I was guilty of was putting too much butter in the skillet. My name is William Miller. Everyone calls me Bill. I'm 70 years old, and my knees creak like old floorboards when the weather changes, but my hands are still steady. I spent 40 years on Gulf Coast oil rigs and in the oil fields, the kind of jobs that teach you 2 things: patience and how to make a breakfast that actually fills you up. The kitchen was quiet, except for the sizzle of bacon grease and the low hum of the refrigerator. This was my favorite time of day. In the other room slept my 3 reasons for keeping on breathing. Leo was already 17, a big kid, catcher for the high school baseball team with an appetite that seemed to have no end. Valerie was 15, with a sharp tongue and a clear head. She talked about studying law like it was already a done deal. And Matthew, my Matthew, was 13. He was just a 2-month-old baby wrapped in a dirty towel when his mother left him here. I flipped the scrambled eggs with salsa, just how Matthew liked them, the yolk soft but not runny. As I cooked, I did the math in my head. My pension was $200 a month. Between the mortgage, utilities, and groceries for 3 growing teenagers, I usually had about $50 left over. I'd been saving that $50 in a coffee can for 6 months to buy Leo a new catcher's mitt for the playoffs. It wasn't a life of luxury. There were no trips to Europe or fancy cars, but this house was warm and full of love, or at least it was until the front door exploded. I didn't even hear a knock. 1 second I was reaching for the salt shaker, and the next, a deafening boom shook my bones, sent framed pictures crashing down in the hallway, and filled the living room with splinters like shrapnel. Before I could even turn off the stove, my kitchen was filled with men in helmets, tactical vests, and assault rifles. They were screaming orders that bounced off the linoleum. "Police, get on the ground, hands where I can see them." Being old doesn't mean you're slow. My first instinct was to run to the hallway, to protect the bedrooms, to protect my kids. I managed 1 step before a heavy boot swept my legs out from under me. I went down hard, my face slammed into the cold tile, right next to a splatter of grease. A sharp pain shot through my bad shoulder, but I ignored it. "Don't hurt them," I yelled from the floor, my voice ragged. "There are children in the house. Please, don't do anything to them." A knee dug into my back, and handcuffs clicked shut around my wrists, with a sound that still echoes in my mind when I remember it. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I heard them wake up. I heard Valerie's scream. I heard Matthew start to cry. "Let him go!" Leo roared. I twisted my neck trying to see. My boy had come out of his room in a t-shirt and boxers, ready to fight an army for his grandpa. "Stay back, Leo," I yelled. "Don't you move, son. Stay back." 2 officers grabbed him and slammed him against the wall. "He's just a boy," I pleaded. "He's 17, please." That's when the sea of uniforms parted, as if making way for royalty, and she walked in. 13 years had passed, but I'd recognize that walk anywhere. Jessica, my daughter. Only it wasn't the Jessica I remembered. The last time I saw her, she was underweight. her skin grey from drugs and cheap booze, with a bruise on her cheek from whatever guy she was destroying herself with that week. She had left 3 crying babies in my living room, said she was going out for milk and vanished. The woman now striding across my kitchen looked like she'd stepped out of a magazine. Cream-coloured coat, perfectly styled hair, expensive dark sunglasses. She took them off slowly to reveal eyes made up with a cruel precision. She looked healthy, she looked rich, and she looked at me with a disgust that froze my blood. "There he is!" she shrieked, pointing at me with a perfectly manicured finger. "There's the monster officer! That's the man who stole my babies!" I was still on the floor, my cheek against the tile, in disbelief. Stole them. I didn't steal them. I rescued them. I picked them up from where she'd thrown them away. Jessica stepped over my legs as if I were garbage and ran toward the hallway where the kids were huddled together. "Oh, my darlings," she cooed with the drama of a cheap soap opera. "Mommy's here. Mommy finally found you. I've been looking for so long." I saw Matthew flinch. He didn't know who this woman was. He was a baby when she left. To him, she was a stranger who smelled of expensive perfume and chaos. But Jessica didn't care. She pulled Matthew and Valerie into a suffocating hug. "Get away from them," I roared, struggling against the cuffs. The knee in my back pressed harder, forcing the air from my lungs. "You have no right, Jessica. You abandoned them. You left them in dirty diapers. You were gone for 2 days. She turned toward me, and for an instant the mask slipped. She smiled, a smile of pure ice that said, "I've already won." Then she turned to the officer beside her, and perfect tears instantly welled in her eyes. "You see, officer," she sobbed, "he's delusional, he's violent, he held us prisoner for 13 years. He told me if I ever came back he'd kill them. I've lived in fear every single day." Lies, it was all lies, but to them I was a disheveled old man in a trashed kitchen, and she was an elegant, devastated mother. "William Miller," the officer said, hauling me to my feet. "You're under arrest for 3 counts of kidnapping, custodial interference, and child endangerment. You have the right to remain silent." They dragged me outside. My neighbors were in their pajamas and robes, watching from their lawns like it was a parade. Mrs. Gable, who I'd shared vegetables from my garden with for years, covered her mouth in horror. I wanted to scream that I was innocent, but the shame choked me. As they pushed me into the back of the patrol car, I looked at my house. The door was hanging off its hinges, and on the porch, the final knife twist plunged into my heart. Jessica had her arms around the children. Leo looked like he was about to be sick. Valerie was crying silently. Matthew was just lost. And in front of them stood a photographer, camera in hand. Jessica was posing, tilting her head to catch the morning light, squeezing them not to comfort them, but to frame them. "Hold it right there, Ms. Miller," the photographer said. "This is the cover of the year, the reunion of the century." The camera flashes blinded me through the glass. My grandchildren were props in her sick play. As the patrol car pulled away, something inside me stopped crying and turned cold. For 13 years, I had protected them from wolves. I worked double shifts. I learned how to braid Valerie's hair. I memorized baseball rules for Leo. I stayed up through Matthew's fevers. I gave up my quiet retirement, my savings, my peace, to fix what she had broken. And in 20 minutes, Jessica had returned from nowhere to burn it all down. In the rearview mirror, the cop looked at me. "Anything to say, old-timer?" I leaned my head back and closed my eyes. "Not yet," I whispered. "Not yet." But the war was just beginning, and I was going to turn her kingdom to ash. The holding cell smelled of bleach, stale sweat, and despair. I sat on a steel bench bolted to the floor, my joints aching from the dampness. Around me were men with hard eyes, scarred knuckles, and tattoos that told stories of bad decisions. And then there was me, Bill Miller, 70 years old, in oversized orange sandals, wondering if my kids had eaten breakfast. A guard banged his nightstick against the bars. "Miller," Legal counsel. They took me to a small interview room. At a scratch table sat a kid who didn't look like he'd even started shaving. Cheap suit, sweaty shirt. "Mr. Miller," he said, his voice cracking, "I'm Brian, your public defender." He wouldn't meet my eyes. Just shuffled papers, dropped his pen, picked it up. "Look, Brian," I said, "I don't need the theatrics. Just tell me when I can go back to my grandkids." He winced. "That's the problem, sir. The judge denied initial release, but we managed to get bail set. $500,000. I let out a short, bitter laugh. "Son, my pension pays for power and food. I've got $50 saved for a baseball glove. You might as well have said 500 million. Brian pulled out a tablet. "It's not just the bail, it's the narrative. You need to see this." And there it was on the news. "Nightmare in the suburbs. Grandfather kidnaps 3 minors." Jessica was at a podium, microphones like hungry snakes. Beside her stood a man carved from expensive marble, Samuel Lancaster, one of those lawyers who ruins lives with a magazine cover smile. "My father is a dangerous fanatic," Jessica cried for the cameras. It was the performance of her life. She said that 13 years ago she came home and I was waiting with a shotgun, that I forced her to flee, that I locked the children in a dungeon. I clenched my fists under the table. The only gun I ever owned was an old air rifle to scare off raccoons, and the dungeon was a bedroom with glow-in-the-dark stars I'd stuck on the ceiling so Matthew wouldn't be afraid of the night. Lancaster took the floor, his voice filled with outrage, saying they wouldn't rest until I was in prison, that they were suing for full custody and damages for emotional torture. I pushed the tablet away so hard it almost fell. "Lies," I growled. "It's all lies, Brian." He swallowed, skeptical. He'd just seen a woman crying in high definition. "Public opinion has already convicted you. If you have any proof, any witnesses." I closed my eyes, and the memory of that day hit me with the force of dust and desperation. I didn't have a shotgun. I had car keys. Jessica had shown up trembling, her skin ashen from pills. "I owe money, a lot of money, to people who send reminders. They're going to kill me, Dad. They're going to hurt the kids," she'd screamed. I didn't have $5,000 in the bank. So I walked out to my old truck, a pickup I'd rebuilt with my own hands. I sold it that afternoon for cash. I walked back home under the hot sun and handed her the wad of bills. "Take it, pay them off, get clean, be a mother." She snatched it without a word of thanks, without a glance at the babies. She just ran. And now she was telling the world I'd chased her off with a gun. "Mr. Miller," Brian said, his voice sounding distant, "we need to make a statement, maybe plead incapacity due to age." I stood up, the chair scraping loudly. "I'm not senile, and I'm not pleading guilty to anything. I saved them. I sold my truck to save her life, and she sold me out for a headline. They put me in a general population cell with 20 or 30 other men and a TV protected by a plastic screen. On it, yellow tape around my house, the shattered door, then my mugshot. I looked unhinged, hair wild, eyes wide with shock. A huge man with a tattooed neck looked at me, then at the TV. The murmuring died. He stood up. "That's you, the kidnapper," he growled. I backed up until I hit the wall. I held up my hands, palms open. "It's not what they're saying. It's a lie." He didn't listen. In jail, there's a hierarchy, and guys who hurt kids are at the bottom of the food chain. "You locked 'em up," he spat. "You stole 'em from their mama." He advanced. The others formed a circle, blocking the guard's view. I saw the rage in his eyes. The same rage I felt for Jessica, only it was aimed at me. I braced myself. I was 70, bad knees, bad shoulder. I wasn't going to win. His fist came like a freight train and shattered my jaw. A white light exploded in my head. I tasted metal. My skull hit the concrete with the sound of a breaking branch. I crumpled to the floor, and the last thing I saw was the news ticker. "Mother reunited with children. A miracle in the north." Then everything went black. I woke up in the infirmary with a drilling pain at the base of my skull. The doctor gave me 2 Tylenol and a form saying I was fit for duty. Brian was waiting outside, more nervous than before. He'd found a bail bondsman, but the price was everything. My house, the land my father bought half a century ago. If I missed a hearing or violated a condition, they'd take my roof. I signed with a shaking hand. The house was just wood and brick. Without my kids, it was just trapped air. The cab ride back was a slow humiliation. The driver kept looking at me in the rearview mirror. My face was on every news channel. The kidnapper grandpa. When he dropped me off, he wouldn't even take my money. He just spat out his window and drove away. I stood on the sidewalk, looking at the wreckage of my life. The police tape danced in the wind like sick party streamers. The oak door I'd restored 3 times was split in half, the lock dangling. I ducked under the tape and pushed it open. The silence hit me first. For 13 years, this house was music, cartoons, sneakers on hardwood, Valerie practicing her violin. It sounded like a dying cat at first, Matthew's laughter at his own jokes. Now just the hum of the fridge and my own breathing. The police had tossed everything. Cushions slashed open, drawers dumped, cereal boxes overturned, dry little O's scattered on the floor. But the real damage wasn't done by them. The hallway was full of crooked, empty picture frames. The photos were gone. Jessica had taken them or destroyed them. She wanted to erase 13 years, pretend I was never their father. I went into the kids' room. Mattresses flipped, clothes everywhere. I sat on Matthew's bed, and my boot hit something hard. I reached under the bed and pulled out an old yellowed pacifier with a teddy bear on it. Matthew had hidden it there when we told him he was a big boy now. I held it, and suddenly I wasn't in a broken house anymore, but at my front door 13 years ago, a humid night that smelled of rain and cheap vodka. Jessica stood by a rusted-out car, its engine rattling, black smoke pouring from the exhaust. A man with neck tattoos waited at the wheel, impatiently drumming on the dashboard. Jessica, thin as a rail, was smoking, holding a diaper bag. I begged her, standing there in my work boots, "Don't go. You have a baby who needs milk. You have a little girl and a little boy. They need you." She blew a cloud of chemical, bitter smoke in my face. "I'm sick of it, Dad. The crying, the diapers, this town. I want to live. I want to be free." She pulled out a keychain, threw it at me. It hit my chest and landed in the dust. "There you go. Those are the keys. If you want them so bad, you can have them. They're just a bunch of monkeys, a burden." That's what she called her own children. Monkeys. A burden. I picked up the keys. When I looked up, she was already getting in the car. "If you leave now, don't come back," I yelled. "Don't come back unless you're clean." She laughed, a sharp, wild sound. "Don't worry, old man. You'll never see me again. I'm going to Vegas." The car peeled out, and I watched its taillights disappear. Then I heard the crying from inside. It was Matthew, hungry. I picked him up and promised a baby who couldn't even focus his eyes that he would never be a burden, that he would be the center of the world. The memory dissolved, and I was back in the present, the pacifier in my hand. She claimed I'd chased her away, but the truth was she'd dumped them like trash because they were in the way of her freedom. And now, because they came with a trust fund, she suddenly remembered she was a mother. A knock on the doorframe snapped me out of it. I pocketed the pacifier. It was Officer Martinez, a local cop I'd sometimes see down at the river. He couldn't look me in the eye. He handed me some papers. "I'm sorry, Bill, I really am, but I have to serve you with this." It was a temporary restraining order. 500 yards away from Leo, Valerie, and Matthew. "No contact, direct or indirect. Surrender any firearms." "She's at the Grand Vista Hotel," he mumbled. "Got private security. Don't go near there. You violate this, they revoke your bail and you'll rot inside." When he left, the house became a tomb. I went to the kitchen. I should eat, though my stomach was in knots. The milk had gone warm. I poured it down the sink. I started cleaning because it was the only thing I could control. I swept up the cereal, picked up glass, wiped away fingerprints. At 9 p.m., I was still sitting there, staring at the wall, wondering if Valerie had her inhaler. Her asthma flared up when she got upset. Jessica didn't even know about that, didn't know where we kept the medicine. Then the old wall-mounted phone rang, the one nobody uses anymore. It startled me. It rang again, shrill. I picked up the receiver, ready to rip the cord out if it was a reporter. "Hello?" Static, heavy breathing, and a trembling whisper. "Grandpa?" My heart stopped. It was Leo. "Are you okay? Where are you?" I said, gripping the phone. "In the bathroom. I stole a maid's cell phone," he whispered. "Grandpa, you have to help us. She's crazy, completely crazy." My legs were shaking, but I forced my voice to be calm. "Slow down, son. What's happening?" "She's locked us in a suite. She took our phones. She took Valerie's inhaler because it looks bad in photos. She brought in a team of stylists, making us wear scratchy clothes and pose for social media. She pinches Matthew when he doesn't smile." Rage clouded my vision. "Leo, listen to me. You have to be strong. Protect your brother and sister." He sobbed. "There are men outside, guards. They won't let us leave. She says you're going to prison forever, that we belong to her now. She talks about money all the time, about lawyers, about a trust fund. She doesn't want us, she wants the check." I knew it in my gut. It wasn't love, it was greed. "I'm not going to prison," I told him, my voice firm. "I'm going to get you back, I promise. But you have to do exactly what I say. Keep your head down. Don't fight the guards. But watch everything. Memorize what she says. Can you do that?" "I think so. But hurry," he whimpered. "She says she's going to take us far away." She mentioned Switzerland, a boarding school. Switzerland. She was going to ship them off like packages. "Grandpa, I have to go. She's coming." I heard a doorknob turn and her high-pitched voice in the background. "Who are you talking to?" The line went dead. I stood there in the dark kitchen, holding the receiver like it was a useless piece of plastic. The law said 500 yards. The law said, "She's their mother." But the law hadn't heard the fear in my boy's voice. I hung up and went to my room. I grabbed an old duffel bag. I wasn't going to wait around for a hearing while she tortured them. I needed help, and I knew who to call. A man I hadn't spoken to in 20 years. Someone who owed me a favor from the days when we worked in the oil fields and were young and stupid. Basil, who everyone called the Bear. He used to be a private investigator until the booze beat him. If anyone could track where Jessica's money was coming from, it was him. I grabbed my keys. The silence wasn't oppressive anymore. It was a countdown. "Not yet, Jessica," I whispered to the empty air. "You haven't won." That same night, I learned it was worse. Leo had managed to tell me more before the line was cut. Jessica had turned the suite into a prison and a movie set. She made Valerie wear a tight dress to record videos under a ring light, forcing them to smile and repeat how much they missed their mom. When the camera was off, she'd lock them in and go to the hotel bar. But what chilled my blood was about Matthew. He has a peanut allergy so severe that even the dust from a shell can close his throat in 2 minutes. We kept EpiPens in the kitchen, in his backpack, and in the glove compartment. Jessica didn't know that. She left before he was eating solid food. Leo told me she ordered room service and tossed peanut butter cookies onto the bed for Matthew to eat because it would look cute. Matthew, terrified, refused, and she held his face, trying to force them into his mouth. Leo had to shove her away to save his brother's life. She took away his EpiPen, saying he was being dramatic. My grandson was without his medicine, locked up with a woman capable of killing him out of ignorance and vanity. I drove to the police station. I was speeding, not even looking at the speedometer. I spent half my life in the oil fields. When something's about to blow, you don't fill out forms. You act or people die. But as I walked in under the fluorescent lights, I understood that my world meant nothing here. I went to the front desk. The sergeant on duty was Davis. I'd fixed his lawnmower for him once, no charge. He saw me, and his face hardened. "I want to file a report," I said. "My grandchildren are in immediate danger." He leaned back, arms crossed. "Danger from who, Mr. Miller?" "From their mother," I spat. "She tried to force a child with a deadly allergy to eat peanuts. She took his medication. Send an officer to the Grand Vista Hotel right now." Davis let out a dry laugh. "Let me get this straight. The man accused of kidnapping 3 minors wants to report the victim for giving her son a cookie. Do you know how crazy that sounds?" "It's not crazy. It's the truth," I said, slamming my hand on the counter. "She doesn't know them. She's hurting them." He stood up, his voice a low threat. "You're out on a miracle, Miller. You're the suspect. She's the mother. If she wants to give him a cookie, she gives him a cookie. You don't get to dictate how she raises the children you stole." Stole. That word again. As if I were a thief in the night, and not the only one who ever cared if they were alive. "She almost killed him," I whispered, my voice breaking. "Go home," he said, pointing to the door, "or I'll have your bail revoked for harassment." I walked out feeling smaller than I ever had in my life. On the rig, I gave orders, and men moved because they knew I had their backs. Here, I was just an old criminal. The law was a brick wall, and I was bashing my head against it. I walked toward my truck, parked on a dark corner. The night air was thick. I felt helpless, and I hated that feeling more than the pain. I touched the door handle, and a voice stopped me. "Mr. Miller." I turned. A silver Mercedes was purring 2 spots down. Leaning against the hood was Samuel Lancaster. He looked even more like a shark in person than on TV. Perfect suit, gleaming shoes, a thin cigarette between his fingers. My fists clenched. "What do you want?" He blew smoke toward the sky and walked toward me with a calculated boredom. "I'm here to offer you a parachute, Bill. May I call you Bill?" "You can call me Mr. Miller," I replied. "And I don't want anything from you." He laughed and pulled out a white envelope. He held it out. "In here is a cashier's check for $50. I froze. It was more money than I'd managed to save in years. "What for?" "A compensation," he said smoothly. "Jessica is feeling generous. She recognizes that you took care of them for a time. All you have to do is sign a document." "What document?" "A voluntary relinquishment of any and all custodial rights. You admit you're old, overwhelmed, that you can't handle 3 teenagers. You step aside, take the money, and move to a quiet retirement community on the coast, and you never contact Jessica or the children again." The rage rose in me like a wildfire. "You want me to sell them?" Lancaster shrugged. "I want you to be realistic. You're 70. You're broke, and you're facing serious charges. I will destroy you in court. I'll paint you as an abusive, senile old hoarder. You either die in prison, or you take the money and go fishing. Everyone wins." I took the envelope. He smiled, triumphant. Then I tore it, slowly, once, then again, until it was confetti. I threw it at his shoes. "You tell my daughter I'm not for sale," I said, stepping into his personal space. "And you tell her that if anything happens to Matthew because of her stupidity, I won't need a lawyer. I'll come for her myself." His smile turned into a venomous sneer. "You're making a mistake, old man. I gave you a chance. Now I'm going to bury you." He got into his Mercedes and drove off, leaving a trail of exhaust. My hands were shaking with adrenaline, not fear. They thought they could buy me. They had no idea who they were dealing with. I got in my truck. I didn't have money or the law on my side, but I had something they didn't, the truth. And I had the bear who could find a needle in a haystack, especially if the needle was made of gold. I started the engine. I wasn't going to sleep. I was going to find out where the money that paid for Lancaster came from and why Jessica needed my grandkids so desperately that she tried to bribe me into silence. I drove to an old trailer behind a warehouse on the edge of town. A single yellow bulb hummed over the door, attracting huge moths. This was where the bear lived. We'd worked together in the Gulf back when we still thought we were invincible. I knocked hard. "Bear, open up! It's Bill!" There was a crash inside, cursing. He opened the door in a stained t-shirt and boxers, a revolver held loosely in one hand and a bottle of liquor in the other. Grey beard, bloodshot eyes. "Damn, Bill, you look like you got hit by a truck." "I feel like it. Can I come in?" I stepped into the smell of old paper, gun oil, and cheap booze. The trailer was a chaos of file boxes and empty bottles, but in one corner was a desk with glowing monitors, his altar. I sat on a crate and told him everything. The raid, the arrest, the cookies, the bribe. He listened without blinking. When I finished, he set the revolver on the table. "So she's back," he mumbled, his voice hoarse. "And she's swimming in cash. Lancaster doesn't get out of bed for less than a 10 grand retainer. She's got a suite, bodyguards." "Where's it coming from?" I asked. The bear cracked his knuckles. "Let's find out." He typed with surprising speed. For a drunk, he had the hands of a surgeon. First, he tracked her old boyfriend, a guy named Tristan. 5 minutes later, he grunted. "First dead end. Tristan's dead, overdosed 2 months ago in a motel. He had $20 and an arrest warrant." "So it wasn't him?" "Nope," he nodded. "But look at this. Jessica is listed as his next of kin. Identified the body and didn't even claim the ashes. Let the state bury him." "Sounds like her." The bear kept digging. "No employment for 10 years. Nothing in her name until 3 weeks ago. And suddenly platinum credit cards, accounts opened in offshore tax havens, a shell company called ABB Holdings." "Where did the seed money come from?" I asked. The bear narrowed his eyes. "Big wire transfer. Came from a law firm in Houston, Montemeyer and Salinas. The kind of inheritance lawyers who handle trust funds for oil money." My pulse quickened. Jessica didn't know anyone like that. Unless it's from the father," I whispered. The bear swiveled in his chair. "The youngest's father. You told me she said he was some street musician." "Yeah," I nodded. "Said his name was Julian and he died before Matthew was born." The bear smiled without any joy. "Rule number 1. Everybody lies, especially addicts." He searched birth certificates, father unknown on all 3. Then he dug into old archives and found a sealed file from 13 years ago, a paternity test ordered when Jessica applied for welfare. "Here," he muttered. "She had to give a name so the state could go after him for child support. She gave one, Julian Cole. I'd never heard that last name before." "Who is he?" The bear was quiet for a long time, just the hum of the computers and the moths beating against the glass. Then he whistled. "You better sit down tight, Bill. Julian Cole wasn't some nobody. He was the secret son, the embarrassing son of Eugene Stone. The name hit me like a fist. Eugene Stone, owner of Stone Petroleum, one of the richest men in the country. He died last month. I'd seen it on the news. Stone kept him at arm's length with hush money," the bear explained, reading. "Julian lived a quiet life, died in a motorcycle accident 4 months ago, left no will." My head was spinning. "So the inheritance goes to his direct heirs?" The bear nodded. "And since he had no wife or living parents, it goes to his children, Leo, Valerie, and Matthew." He opened a legal file. "The Julian Cole Trust, valued at $5 million. I felt dizzy. My kids, in their hand-me-down clothes and generic cereal, were multi-millionaires. "And here's the kicker," the bear said, tapping the screen. "The money's in a trust until they turn 21, but the legal guardian collects an administration fee, $500,000 a year, plus housing and access to the assets for the benefit of the minors." I tasted bile. It wasn't love. It wasn't redemption. It was a salary. She needs custody to open the vault, I said, trembling with rage. The bear handed me a printout. Not just custody. She needs to be the sole guardian. That's why she accused you of kidnapping. If you're a convicted felon, you can't fight for guardianship. She gets the kids, collects the check, and lives like a queen while they're raised by nannies and boarding schools. 13 years without a single call, not one birthday, and as soon as the money appeared, she kicked down my door. The bear pointed to another clause. Residency in the Cole family mansion in a gated community in Houston until the youngest turns 18. And one more piece of information that twisted the knife. The hearing to appoint a permanent guardian and release the funds was next Tuesday. 6 days away. I understood the whole plan. If she'd shown up normally, a judge would have seen 13 years of abandonment and my raising them. I could have won guardianship, or at least shared it, and that would mean controlling the trust to protect the kids. But a kidnapper doesn't get custody. A criminal doesn't manage $18 million. She had to destroy me. That's why the SWAT team, the story about the gun, the dungeon. She needed me to be a monster so she could be the savior. If I was in prison on Tuesday, she'd walk in alone, unopposed, and get the keys to the money. I had to warn them. I pulled out a burner phone and dialed the number of the cell Leo had used. I prayed he still had it hidden. It rang once, then a robotic voice came on. The number was disconnected. I tried again. Same thing, she'd found it. My boy was locked up with guards and a mother who saw him as a walking dollar sign, and I couldn't even tell him, "I'm coming for you." The bear turned up the volume on the news. Jessica was in front of the hotel, dressed in black and pearls like a grieving saint. Lancaster behind her, an elegant vulture. The reporter asked about her plans. Jessica looked into the camera, fake tears welling. They needed to heal, needed privacy. That's why they were leaving that very night for Europe, for a specialized center in Switzerland for victims of kidnapping. "Our flight leaves in 2 hours. We're heading to the private airport," she said. The air left my lungs. If she got them on a plane and out of the country, it was over. International custody battles take years. She'd stick them in a boarding school, collect her $500,000 a year, and I would never see them again. "She's running," I said, the pieces clicking into place. She was afraid I'd managed to fight back before Tuesday. This wasn't a legal battle anymore. It was a rescue. If we go, I violate the order. I violate bail. If they catch me, they'll put me away for 20 years. The bear checked the cylinder of his revolver and tucked it into his waistband. He tossed me the keys to his old beater car. "Then we better not get caught." I thought of Leo's terrified voice, of Valerie's asthma, of Matthew's life sold for a mansion. "Let's go," I said. The bear drove like the devil himself was chasing us down dark back roads. The engine roared, the chassis shook, and the speedometer needle climbed until it looked like it would break. Wind whipped through the windows, smelling of rain and burning rubber. I was gripping the dashboard with one hand and a heavy lug wrench I'd pulled from under the seat with the other. 10 minutes, Bill!" the bear yelled. "If the pilot has clearance, they'll take off before we even get through the gate." The private airfield came into view, a glass building, a high fence topped with razor wire. On the tarmac, amber lights glowed, and there, like a white monster, was a private jet, engines whining, a black SUV parked next to the boarding stairs. I saw them under the floodlights, like some hellish stage play. Jessica was yanking Matthew by the arm. My boy was digging in his heels. She was pulling him without compassion. A large man was carrying Valerie over his shoulder as she kicked and struggled. And Leo, my Leo, wasn't crying. He was fighting. He stood in front of a guard, throwing punches with everything he had. The guy just laughed and shoved him. Leo fell, got right back up and put himself between the plane and his brother. "They're forcing them, Bear!" I yelled. "Ram the gate!" He didn't hesitate. He floored it and plowed right through the chain-link fence. Metal screamed. Sparks flew, and we skidded onto the tarmac. The pilot must have seen us because the engines whined to a desperate shriek. "Block the plane!" I shouted. The bear cut the wheel and screeched to a halt sideways in front of the jet's nose. We were just feet from the stairs. I threw my door open before the car even settled and jumped out. My knees screamed in protest, but adrenaline was my anesthetic. I raised the lug wrench, heavy and cold. "Let them go!" I roared over the howl of the engines. The guard put Valerie down. Leo looked at me, his eyes wide with disbelief and hope. "Grandpa!" Jessica spun around. The wind whipped her hair across her face. She didn't look scared. She looked furious. "Get them on the plane, now!" she shrieked at the guards. The men hesitated, seeing an old man with a chunk of metal and a crazed driver with a revolver in his belt. I advanced. I had arthritis and a heart that sometimes skipped a beat, but in that moment, I felt like a giant. "If you touch them again, I'll break every bone in your body," I growled. The bigger guard reached into his jacket. The bear fired a shot into the air. The blast tore through the night. "Back off!" he yelled. "The next one's not a warning!" The guy froze, his hands up. Jessica grabbed Matthew's shirt and tried to drag him up the stairs herself. "No!" I yelled and ran. I reached the stairs just as she was pulling him onto the first step. I slammed the lug wrench against the metal railing, a deafening clang that echoed. "Let him go, Jessica." She looked down at me from above. "You're pathetic, a poor old man. You think you can stop this. I have them. They're mine." "You birthed them," I spat. "You don't own them." Sirens, faint at first, then right on top of us. Red and blue lights washed over the fuselage. Airport police, state troopers. Who knew? Jessica smiled, a cruel, triumphant smile. "It's over, Bill. You just handed me everything." She was right. I'd violated the order, destroyed property, brought a weapon onto a tarmac. But as long as that plane didn't take off, I had bought time. "Sir, drop the object!" A megaphone blared from behind me. I turned. Patrol cars, officers aiming their weapons at me. I looked at Leo, at Valerie huddled in a ball, at Matthew still clutched by her. "I love you," I yelled. "I love you more than anything. Don't you forget it." I started to lower the wrench to surrender, but the guard who had hesitated before lunged at me. I reacted on pure instinct, raising my arm to block him. "Taser! Taser!" someone yelled. I felt the sting of the prongs hitting my chest. It was like being struck by lightning. My entire body seized up. White, brutal pain. I fell backward onto the tarmac. The wrench clattered away. I heard Leo scream my name. Boots surrounded me. I was pinned to the ground, cuffed so tightly I could feel it grinding on bone. "Stop resisting!" they were yelling, though I couldn't even breathe. Through the fog of pain, I saw Jessica at the top of the stairs. She wasn't running anymore. She was watching them drag me away like a sack of garbage. She straightened her dress, smoothed her hair, and spoke to the pilot. I could read her lips. They couldn't leave. The tarmac was a crime scene, and it was locked down. Rage twisted her face, but she had to herd the kids back into the plane without taking off. She wasn't leaving that night. I'd bought time by trading my freedom for a delay. They threw me into a patrol car. I caught a glimpse of the bear, cuffed over the hood of his car. He looked at me and gave a grim nod. I passed out before we got to the station. I woke to the beep of a heart monitor and the smell of disinfectant and floor wax. I tried to move and saw my wrist was handcuffed to the rail of a hospital bed. Prison ward. An officer stood guard at the door. My chest ached where the taser prongs had hit. When the guard saw I was awake, he approached without sympathy. "Welcome back, Miller." "Where are they?" I croaked. "Doesn't matter. You've got bigger problems. The DA's office added new charges." I swallowed. "What charges?" "Aggravated assault, violation of a protective order, property damage, resisting arrest, and since you entered a regulated airfield and attacked an aircraft, they want to hang you with terrorism against airport facilities. Federal crime, 20 years minimum, no bail." I stared at the ceiling. 20 years. I'd die in prison. Jessica would get them and the 18 million. My eyes burned. I thought I had lost. until I remembered the loose floorboard in my bedroom, the hollow space the police had missed because they were looking for a non-existent dungeon. There, inside a cedar-scented box, was a mustard-colored envelope. I'd kept it for 13 years, hoping I'd never have to use it. It was the nuclear option. It would destroy Jessica, but it would also break my children's hearts. I never wanted them to know who their mother really was, but I had no choice anymore. If I wanted to save their future, I had to detonate their past. I looked at the guard. I need to make one phone call. One, he replied. To who? Not a lawyer, I said, my voice hardening. To the only man left who can finish this. I needed the bear to get out and get into my house one last time. Because that envelope wasn't just a piece of paper. It was a receipt, and it was time to show the world exactly what Jessica Miller had sold 13 years ago. The hours in the prison ward dragged on. Around 2 a.m., the air changed. The young guard was replaced by one with a thick neck and an unblinking stare. He checked his watch and stepped out, leaving the door ajar. My instincts screamed. A shadow detached itself from the darkness of the hallway, and a man in surgical scrubs walked in, but he was too broad-shouldered. Face mask, blue gloves. He moved like a predator. He walked over to my IV drip and pulled out a syringe filled with a clear liquid. "Who sent you?" I rasped. He froze, then locked his dead eyes on me. "Go to sleep, old man. It's better this way. Heart failure. Very common at your age." He reached for the injection port. I didn't think. I reacted. My left arm was chained, but my right leg was free under the sheet. I waited until he leaned in and kicked out with all my old man rage. My heel connected with his kneecap. There was a sickening crunch. He howled and went down. The syringe shattered on the floor. "Help!" I roared, rattling the chain. The man scrambled up, limping, and fled just as nurses came running. I had survived, but I knew one thing. The war had escalated. Lancaster was scared of what I might have, and if they were trying to kill me in here, God help the bear. 5 miles away, under a moonless sky, the bear was fighting his own war. He'd left a borrowed bicycle in the woods behind my property. The house, wrapped in tape, looked deserted, but he could feel the silence. No crickets. That means predators. He slipped through a utility room window with a pocket knife. He moved like a ghost across the floor, avoiding the mess from the raid. In the hallway, a floorboard creaked. Click. A beam from a tactical flashlight blinded him, then another and another. 3 lights from the living room. "We've got company," a deep voice said. "Not police, mercenaries. Mr. Lancaster said the rat might come back for his cheese." The bear didn't freeze. He dropped. A taser sizzled through the air where his chest had been and embedded itself in the wall. He rolled toward a bedroom door. "Get him and make it look like an accident," the voice ordered. He tripped a few times. The bear, 65, fueled by liquor and loyalty against young professionals. He had no gun. They'd taken it, just his hands and whatever he could find. He grabbed a heavy lamp with a brass base and waited. The first man peeked in, and the bear brought the lamp down on his skull. He dropped without a sound, 1 down. The bear charged into the hallway and tackled the second man, slamming him against the wall. The other one hit him in the shoulder with a nightstick. The bear screamed but held on like a dog. He gave him 2 headbutts, and the man's nose exploded in a spray of red. The third man, the leader, kicked him in the ribs, sending him flying. A boot pinned him to the floor. "Where is it?" he demanded, pressing down. "We checked the walls, the attic. Where did the old man hide his leverage?" The bear, bleeding from a cut above his eye, gave a red smile. "You checked the walls, but you didn't check the floor." He twisted the man's ankle with a dirty bar fight move. The leader fell. The bear crawled to my bedroom, pulled back the rug, pried up the loose floorboard with bloody fingernails, and pulled out the box. Just then, the door burst open, and the leader came in with a knife. "It's over, old man," he hissed. The bear glanced at the window that jumped to the backyard. He clutched the box. "Not yet," he muttered, and launched himself through it. Glass exploded like diamonds. He landed in bushes that broke his fall and tore at his skin, rolled onto the concrete with a cry as a shard of glass embedded itself in his calf. But he had the box. He heard shouting above, a flashlight beam sweeping the yard. "Get down there and finish him!" The bear forced himself up, limping, leaving a trail of blood. He vaulted the fence and landed in the neighbor's grass as the mercenaries came out the front. He lay still, hugging the box like a holy relic. They ran past, just inches away. The bear waited for an hour, opened the box just enough to confirm the envelope was there, closed it, and didn't go to the hospital. He knew they'd be watching it. He walked 5 miles through the woods, bleeding with every step, to deliver the payload. When I saw him the next day in the visitor's room, broken and bruised, I didn't see a drunk. I saw a soldier who had just completed the most important mission of his life. And when I held that blood-stained envelope, I knew that whatever happened in that courtroom, I wasn't alone. The day of the trial dawned grey and humid. I hadn't slept. I'd spent the night with the mustard-colored envelope pressed against my skin under my prison uniform. It was scratchy, but that scratch kept me sane. They transported me in a windowless van. The chains on my ankles sounded like a funeral dirge. When I got out, the noise hit me. This wasn't justice, it was a circus. Hundreds of people behind barricades, reporters screaming my name, looking for a grimace they could sell, signs held by strangers. "Protect the children, lock him up and monster." Lancaster had turned public opinion into a lynch mob. I walked in with my head down. The courtroom was cold, enormous, all dark wood designed to make you feel small. The gallery was packed, shoulder to shoulder. Neighbors I'd known for years avoided my gaze, parents of Leo's teammates, and there was Jessica at the prosecution's table. But she wasn't the woman in the expensive coat anymore. Now she was the long-suffering mother. Oversized grey sweater, no makeup, dark circles on display, hair in a messy bun, a tissue clutched in her hand, a masterpiece of manipulation. Lancaster sat beside her, confident as a knife. My public defender, Brian, was sweating. He whispered that the DA was going for 20 years, that if I showed remorse, maybe they'd drop it to 10. 10 years was a death sentence. "No," I told him. "I'm not accepting anything." The judge, a Mr. Paredes, entered with a face like stone. He looked over his glasses, and in his eyes I was already guilty. The trial was a slaughter. Lancaster didn't present a case. He staged a show. He painted me as a bitter old man who stole children to fill a void. He spoke of dungeons and psychological torture, and he called his star witness. I was expecting a cop. I was not expecting Theodore Guzman, my neighbor from 2 doors down. The same man I'd helped rebuild his fence after a hurricane, the man I'd shared beers with on my porch. He took the stand without looking at me. "Mr. Guzman," Lancaster said, pacing in front of the jury, "tell us what you heard over the years from the Miller house." Guzman swallowed, glanced at Jessica, who gave him a tiny nod. "Screaming. A lot of screaming. At night, I heard the children begging to be let out. I heard Mr. Miller hitting them." A gasp went through the room. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. It was a lie. The only screaming in my house was over a game on TV or kids playing. "Liar," I whispered. Brian grabbed my arm to keep me quiet. Lancaster smiled. "And why didn't you call the police?" "I was afraid. Everyone was afraid of him. He's violent. He told me once that if anyone ever messed with his family, he'd bury them." A lie bought with money or threats. The jury was eating it up. Brian told me this was bad. I looked down at the envelope inside my uniform and understood. This system wasn't a court. It was theater. I stood up. "You're fired, Brian." I said it loud enough for the court reporter to hear. Brian froze. The judge banged his gavel. "Mr. Miller, sit down. You have representation." No, Your Honor, I replied. I'm representing myself. The room filled with whispers. Lancaster looked delighted, an old man self-destructing. The judge warned me it was a bad idea, that I didn't know the rules. I held his gaze. I may not know procedure, Your Honor, but I know the truth, and I'm the only one in here who does. After a heavy silence, he agreed. Brian gathered his briefcase with trembling hands, wished me luck, and left. The judge asked for my first witness. I said, I have no witness. Lancaster let out a small laugh. The judge, irritated, asked if I had a statement then, or if we were just wasting time. I reached into my uniform and pulled out the mustard-colored envelope, wrinkled, stained with dirt, and the bear's dried blood. I saw Jessica's eyes lock onto it. She stopped acting. Her body went rigid. She recognized the color of her sin. I walked slowly to the bench, holding the envelope high for the jury to see. The courtroom went silent. The kind of silence that feels heavy as a stone. I tore the seal. The sound of ripping paper echoed like a gunshot. My hands were steady. I pulled out a document, handwritten on lined paper, yellowed with age, the edges worn, but bearing a notary's seal dated August 14th, 2011. I cleared my throat and read in a voice that was clear and cold, for every corner of that room to hear. I, Jessica Miller, do hereby sell, in total and permanent fashion, my parental rights and authority over my children Leo, Valerie, and Matthew to William Miller. This transfer is final and absolute. In exchange for relinquishing all claim to motherhood and committing to never again contact them or William Miller, I accept the sum of $15,000 in cash. This money is for the purchase of a 2011 Ford Mustang convertible. I swear I will never return. I held the paper up. $15,000, the price of 3 lives. The courtroom erupted in a collective gasp. The court reporter stopped typing, her mouth open. The bailiff took a disgusted step forward, but I wasn't done. I pulled out a photograph that had been clipped behind the paper. I showed it to the jury and to the judge. It was Jessica in a dealership parking lot, leaning against a red Mustang, top down, smiling like a predator. In one hand were the keys, in the other, a fan of cash. And behind her, out of focus but clear as day, on the hot asphalt, was a baby carrier. Matthew, 2 months old, red-faced from crying, abandoned while his mother posed with her money. I placed the letter and the photo in front of Judge Paredes. I watched the color drain from his face. He took the paper, and his hand trembled. He read it once, then again. He looked at the photo. His professional composure evaporated, replaced by the raw human fury of someone looking at a monster. Lancaster, the invincible lawyer, was petrified. His face turned to ash. He looked at the document, then at his client, and he physically edged away from her, as if her rottenness was contagious. He closed his folder, set down his pen. Surrender. Jessica, for the first time, was naked. There were no pretty tears, no performance. She looked for allies in the room and found none. The jury stared at her with hatred, the public with horror. The judge was breathing heavily, trying to contain himself. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, dangerous. Ms. Miller, in 20 years on this bench, I thought I'd seen everything. But this, you sold your children. You didn't give them up for adoption. You didn't ask for help. You sold them for a car. You, he held up the photo, left your infant son on the pavement in the middle of summer to take a picture with cash. Jessica jumped to her feet in a panic. That's not real, she shrieked. It's fake. He made it up. The judge slammed his gavel like thunder. The notary seal is authentic. The handwriting is a match for everything you've signed this month. Do not insult my intelligence. Jessica crumpled, sobbing ugly, real sobs. But Lancaster made one last attempt to save the ship. He stood, his voice theatrical, claiming it was irregular, demanding an expert review, that I'd had 13 years to forge it. The judge was about to respond when the doors at the back of the courtroom burst open. The whole room jumped. I turned, my chains rattling. It was Leo. He was sweating, his shirt torn, missing a shoe, his eyes lit with a fire I recognized. Jessica shrieked his name like a command. Leo ignored her and strode down the center aisle. A bailiff tried to stop him, but I roared, "Let him pass! He's my grandson!" The judge held up a hand. "Let the boy speak." Leo came to my side. He was taller than me now. He squeezed my shoulder. "Sorry I'm late, Grandpa. I had to climb out the hotel bathroom window. The guard was fast, but I was faster." Then he looked at the judge. "Everything my grandpa said is true. She's lying. She doesn't want us. She wants the money." Lancaster objected. "Minor under duress. Brainwashing." Leo reached into his pocket and pulled out a cheap black flip phone. The burner I'd left him. She'd found a decoy. "I'm not brainwashed," he said, holding it up like evidence, "and I have proof." He flipped it open, hit a button, and held the speaker up to the microphone. The audio was staticky, but the voice was unmistakable. It was Jessica, with no tears, no sweetness, just pure gravel. "So, when do I get the money?" she demanded. A man's voice replied, "As soon as we sign the guardianship papers on Tuesday, Jessica." "Good, because I can't stand another day with these brats." The big one looks at me like he wants to kill me, and the little one won't stop whining. It's pathetic. The man, "Endure it. It's $18 million. Keep your eyes on the prize." Jessica, "I know. As soon as the check clears, I'm buying them 3 tickets to that boarding school in Switzerland, the cheapest one, but far away. Let them rot there." The man asked about me, and Jessica laughed. A dry, cold sound. "Don't worry. Lancaster says he'll get 20 years. He's old, he'll die in there. I'll be toasting in Paris while his grandkids rot in the Alps. He's a stupid old fool who should have died years ago." Leo switched off the recording, and the silence was absolute, heavier than anything that had come before. The jury was horrified. The judge was no longer surprised. He was enraged. Jessica, her mask finally gone, let out an animalistic scream and lunged, not at me, but at Leo, her fingernails aiming for his face. "Give me that! You belong to me!" she shrieked. Leo backed away, holding the phone out of her reach. I moved to step between them, but I didn't need to. "Bailiffs!" the judge thundered. 3 officers tackled her and cuffed her. She was kicking, biting, spitting, screaming obscenities. "I'm their mother, they're mine." Lancaster saw the disaster and tried to flee. He closed his briefcase, gathered his papers, and took a step toward the exit. "Mr. Lancaster," the judge said in a calm voice that was terrifying. The lawyer froze. "You presented a witness you knew was perjuring himself. You facilitated fraud. You were complicit in a conspiracy to rob a man of his freedom and his family for money." He looked at the officers. "Take Ms. Miller into custody. Charges for perjury, fraud, child abandonment, assault, and conspiracy." Jessica turned to me, her face a mask of pure rage. "I hate you. I hope you die." And for the first time in 13 years, I didn't feel anger, just pity. "I know," I said softly. "That's why you lost." The judge also ordered Lancaster be detained for contempt, pending an investigation, a recommendation for disbarment, and criminal charges. They led him away, his expensive shoes dragging. The courtroom was chaos, reporters shouting, but in the middle of it all was an impossible calm. Leo looked down at my chains. "We won, Grandpa?" he asked, his voice trembling now that the adrenaline was fading. I saw the judge motion for the bailiffs to remove my shackles. I saw the empty space where the monsters had been. "Yeah, son," I answered, pulling him into a fierce hug. "Yeah, we won." The judge banged his gavel one last time. "Case dismissed with prejudice. Mr. Miller, you are a free man. And as for the custody of the minors, I believe they are exactly where they need to be." I walked out of that courthouse not as a defendant, but as a grandfather. Leo was by my side, and the most important thing was still ahead, getting Valerie and Matthew back. We went straight to the hotel. The guards tried to stop us, but this time I wasn't carrying a lug wrench. I was carrying an order signed by a federal judge. The second they saw it, they stepped aside. When I opened the door to the suite, Valerie and Matthew were on the couch, huddled and terrified. They thought their mother was coming back to drag them to Switzerland. When they saw me, when they saw Leo, safe, they let out a sob that broke my heart and put it back together all at once. Matthew crashed into me, burying his face in my stomach. Valerie clung to my arm like she was drowning. I held them all and promised that no one would ever take them away again. The next few months were a whirlwind of paperwork. The money, $5 million, felt unreal, like a phantom number. It was theirs. It came from a father they never knew and a mother who sold them. I went to the law firm that managed the trust, the same one that had been ready to help Jessica plunder it. I walked in, wearing my best flannel shirt and my work boots. They looked down their noses at me until I put the guardianship papers on the table. I fired them all, the trustees, the lawyers, the accountants who had looked the other way. I moved the trust to a conservative firm with ironclad ethics and locked it down so that even I couldn't touch the principal. That money was for college, first homes, futures. I collected the court-authorized administration fee, yes, but not for luxuries, to fix what was broken. 6 months later, I stood at the doorway of my old house. A for sale sign swayed in the wind. It hurt to say goodbye. I'd raised my daughter there, and then her children. There had been laughter and tears, but also the shattered door, the yellow tape, the ghosts. It was time to let go. I sold it to a young couple just starting out. I took what was left, and a portion of that fee, and I bought a dream I'd had since I was 20. A big RV, one of those that's like a luxury rolling house with real beds, a full kitchen, and space to live together without being on top of each other. We left on a Tuesday morning. We didn't look back. We drove west, watching the plains turn into hills and then into red desert. We sang along with the radio, ate at roadside diners, and laughed until it hurt. For the first time in 13 years, there was no shadow waiting for us down the road. I'm sitting now in a folding chair on the rim of the Grand Canyon. The sun is setting, painting the sky in oranges and purples that seem impossible. The air smells like pine and campfire smoke. In front of me, a fire crackles. Leo is teaching Matthew how to roast a marshmallow without setting it on fire, though Matthew seems determined to turn his into a piece of charcoal. Valerie is reading, wrapped in a blanket, her feet up on a log, at peace in a way I haven't seen since she was a little girl. And looking at them, I don't see $18 million. I don't see trusts or court cases. I see my kids. Jessica thought she could buy happiness, that a mansion and a private jet would fill the hole she has inside her. She thought selling her children for $15. 000 was a good deal because it bought her a convertible. She was wrong. They say blood is thicker than water, and they use it to justify sins, to force you to forgive someone who destroys you just because they share your DNA. I learned the hard way that blood is just biology. Nothing more. Love is a choice. Loyalty is an action. Jessica chose the money. I chose them. And as I watch Matthew laugh when his marshmallow bursts into flames and Leo claps him on the back while Valerie just smiles at them, I know I chose right. She sold these moments for the price of a used car. The money might be sitting in a bank somewhere, but it's not worth a single one of their hugs. Because family isn't who gave birth to you. Family is who stays. Who sells their truck to pay your debts, who rams a fence to stop a plane, who sits beside you in a courtroom when the whole world hates you. Family is who's there when the storm hits, and who's still there when the sun comes out. And looking at my 3 kids by the fire, I know one thing for certain. We're home. Wherever we park this rolling house, we're home. And that's a kind of wealth Jessica will never understand. And if this story of fighting for justice and protecting the ones you love moved your heart, please give it a like and subscribe to support this old man. Where are you watching from today? Let me know in the comments. I really do read them and I appreciate every single one.